Hey, it's Andrew Wiebe here, and this is a commentary for my first album, Shipwrecked My Sentiments. It was released in 2006, and it is a solo album. We kick things off here with a track called Six Sides. Now, there aren't too many tracks off of the album that I still perform live, but this is one of them. And I think it's kind of an upbeat tune, and although a lot of my songs tend to be sometimes a little mellow or sometimes a little on the slow side, this is a nice upbeat song to either start the set with or just include in a batch of upbeat tunes. So, Six Sides is a song about disappointment. And in my short musical career at the time, I had many failed bands and many failed attempts at doing musical collaboration with other people. And so this is kind of a culmination of some of those emotions and feelings that I was going through when some of those things happened. And I think being in a band is just one of those things. It takes a lot of commitment. You have to be committed to the music and to the band, even over and above your feelings or some of the relationships within the band and the band members. And because that means you're committed to a greater vision and a greater cause. So even at the expense of sometimes, the relationship that you have with the other members, it's that willingness to continue and to continue working on music in spite of maybe what's going on a personal level. And I think it requires that kind of dedication and commitment to really do a band right and do music right. So, at the time it felt like the end of the world, I have to admit. It's like, this is, I've been doing music for a while now, and it seems like everything I'm kind of throwing at the world is kind of failing, and not because the music was bad or anything like that, but because we couldn't seem to keep or hold the band together. And again, looking back, I can kind of see it's still kind of in early phases of my music career, if you want to call it that. And so it's too early to really see whether or not it's going to be like a failing endeavor or what have you. But I think there's, again, the bottom line is there's some emotion that goes on when you are in a band, and there are personal relationships within that band, and things don't work out exactly the way you hope. And we're diving right in already to a track called Not By a Long Shot. Now, the great thing about Six Sides, or that first track, is that it represents most of the group that performed on this album. I actually handled the vocals, acoustic and electric guitars, and bass, and some keyboards on this album. So, didn't have like a dedicated bass player for any of this. I actually played all of the bass. I'm not saying I did it well, I'm just saying that I did. The drummer, of course, was Adam Burwash, and it's possible I might get him to come in and talk about this too sometime and do a separate commentary. Christopher Connolly did some of the backing vocals throughout the album, and then Josh Park did the violin parts on about, I guess, 3 or 4 tracks of the album. So really the only other person that contributed to this album was Jason Bray, and you can hear his backing vocals on Not By a Long Shot. And Human, there might have been 1 or 2 others, but I think that's actually about it. Not By a Long Shot is just a song about trying to live up to an ideal and falling short. So, for me anyway, the Christian walk, believing in God and all that kind of stuff, sort of, how do you live up to such a high ideal is kind of the question that I'm asking. I think I've grown and matured as a believer since, and so my perspective on that is kind of different. But I think it's still like kind of a valid theme in life, especially if you're like a youth struggling with self-image or what have you. Not being able to live up to someone's ideal it really just only takes a toll on your self-image and your belief level in yourself. So that's one of the interesting things about this song. I think it's still a very relevant theme. And the style of the track is hard to describe. It is rock, but the verses have almost a jazzy or funky feel to them, and when it gets into the chorus, it goes into this hooky sort of melody in the chorus. There's also a guitar solo here. You're hearing it right now. I'm actually pretty happy with this guitar solo. I was actually developing something way more complicated than this, and I found myself actually simplifying a lot of guitar parts on this album just simply for the reason that it wasn't coming together. But I think the bottom line is I just needed to practice it more, and if I wanted to do more complicated things with the solos, I really would have needed to take a little more time to kind of woodshed. But anyway, I'm still pretty proud of how this particular solo turned out. I think, in some cases, revising the guitar solos worked out really well, and this is one of those cases. To this day, I'm actually still surprised by the amount of positive feedback I get on this album from other music companies or critics or reviewers. I still seem to get a lot of positive feedback on this album, and so I'm kind of continually amazed and surprised because it really isn't a perfect album, not by a long shot. It's definitely not. There's a lot of, I wouldn't even necessarily mistakes, but there's some vocal parts that just don't quite match or sync between the lead and the backing, mostly because I was pretty inexperienced at singing at the time, and I've since improved a lot, so there is that facet to it as well. There's maybe little fixes here and there that we did. I guess that's not such a big deal. I think every album kind of has that. But, there's definitely, some wrong note was hit on the bass or what have you, so we had to go back and fix it, or an out-of-tune guitar, But this song's called Too Weak. I don't perform this one live quite as much anymore. I do perform Six Sides and Not by a Long Shot still pretty frequently. Too Weak, I've recently revised a little bit and kind of come up with a little more of an interesting, funky guitar part to go along with it. But I think really the interesting thing about this song, it almost just kind of flows in and out of parts. It's almost like there is no defining hook or chorus to the song. I think if anything, the part that I kind of call the bridge is maybe the hook of the song, and that only happens once, so it doesn't get repeated. It's actually a relatively short song as well. For whatever reason, I think when I was undertaking this project, I was like, oh yeah, all these songs are going to be, 7-minute epics, and I'm going to write the next, Stairway or what have you, and it was just very, very ambitious kind of project. But, when you kind of know the type of music that I like extreme a lot, and they had an album called 3 Sides to Every Story, and it's just a fantastic album, but the genres and the musical styles just span a ton of different feels. There's everything kind of their trademark funk rock or funk metal sound, all the way to almost ballads to orchestral rock. There's just so much packed into one album, and I think that's what I aspire to. I think though, when I began working on Shipwrecked, in all honesty, the idea was to do a EP and not a full-length album. So when we did record 8 songs, it was well, why don't you go and work on 2 more and see what you can come up with? And that's what I did. And in fact, there was going to be 11 tracks, but the other one that was called The Parade, that one didn't work out. We just couldn't figure out the drums and how that was supposed to go. And we couldn't figure out, the right parts to go along with it. This song's called Clay to Mold. This is another song that I still perform live, but in a very different way. I think it's one of those songs that kind of grows and changes every time I play it, in a way. And it's just never stayed the same. And the album version here is also very, very different than the way it started. It was actually a little more of a acoustic guitar, but fast riff. And when we tried recording it, it was really hard to get it in a proper tempo. And so I think I just went to work on revising it and realized that I kind of liked funky, obviously. So I wanted to bring a little bit of funk to this album. and in a way, it might be a little over the top with the little wahs, little wah guitars in there, but I think it's still a pretty fun track. I pretty much did everything on this track. That's hilarious. Lead and backing vocals, electric guitars, bass, keyboards, and Adam did the drums on this, so there's really nothing else to this whole thing. Live, it was an interesting. I think I've really only performed it this way live once, but you definitely needed like a second guitarist to kind of cover the parts, or at least that's what I was finding. You know, we talked about the fact that it's not perfect. I mean, even the website address on the liner notes, I think it reads dawmusic.com, so it doesn't have that hyphen in there. For some reason, it just assumed that URL would be available, and yet someone had already parked it. And I could understand why, because DAW is Digital Audio Workstation. So, you know, as early as 2006 already, people were already, you know, parking domains like that to kind of hang on to them. RedFlameRecords.com, of course, still exists, and you can go there and check out the website. But it, you know, currently it's just in one of those phases where it's, you know, because I took over as the sole proprietor of the business. I used to have a partner, and Adam Burrosh, of course, was my partner in creating this album and the artwork and all that. Is, you know, it's no longer with Red Flame. I'm the sole proprietor, so the website's seen some changes since we recorded this album. But I think, you know, I do want to get a little more information up there about artists and albums and such, so that's something that'll probably be forthcoming. Here's another guitar solo on the album that probably worked and reworked, but I think actually this one worked out more or less the way I'd written it. And the little tapping thing there at the end was kind of Adam's idea, but it was really good to have someone else producing the album, as much as I may have hated it at the time. Just to give me a little perspective on, hey, you know, that solo's great, but we need a good way to end it. And that's pretty much where Adam came in on this project, you know, aside from playing some fantastic drums. This next track we've got coming up is Afraid. I would say, you know, it's easily one of the darkest tracks on the whole CD. Again, it's just kind of asked the question, like, you know, you kind of put me through a lot of emotional torture and pain, and so what was the point of that? What was the worth and value in that? And I think we've maybe all felt that way from time to time. But, yeah, it's got some nice violin in it as well. Let's talk about some of the other credits we've got here. So obviously I already told you a little bit about the musicians on this album, but some of the artwork and things like that. So it was obviously produced by Adam and myself, so we co-produced the entire CD. It was recorded by Adam, myself, and Jason Bray. So Jason Bray, he did a little bit of backing vocals on this album, but he also had a hand in recording it. And I mean, more or less, that's just hitting and you know, the record button and whatnot. But he helped us set up mics, and he was just kind of learning his way around the studio. So he was being kind of an intern. It was mixed and mastered by Adam. And that's quite the undertaking when you really think about, you know, it's usually typically in the music world, someone will mix the album, but then they'll get someone else to master it with different tools, different set of ears and all that kind of stuff. We didn't do that. Same set of ears, same set of tools. And so all I can say is, you know, Adam did a great job on mixing and mastering it, especially like it was a solo endeavor. He did it himself. The CD artwork and design was both myself and Adam. To a larger degree, Adam. I kind of came up with the basic concept of it and the color scheme that I wanted to use, but he pretty well took it from there and ran with it, and he was just seeing things that I wasn't seeing, which is great. Again, having a second set of eyes or ears is very useful when creating artwork or CD. You know, a complete recording project. Illustrations and photos were by me. Technically, there aren't illustrations. That was another little mistake that we made. Like, I thought I was going to be doing some drawings and things, so I think we pretty well used, I don't want to say like stock clip art, but there's little fonts and things you can download that contain some of the artwork you see in the background. Like, I think on the credits page where it says all songs written by David Andrew Wiebe, there's like a little unicorn in the background. I'm pretty sure that's like, one of those font dealies. Or when you take out the CD and you see the compass, north, south, west, east, I'm pretty sure that's also one of those font things, and it wasn't all like custom built from scratch. But that's the great thing about design, is there's a lot of pre-made tools and brushes and things you can use to really make some great looking artwork. And I think that was one thing we did pretty well, and a lot of people compliment us on with this release. So that was Afraid, and again, I think the violin is really featured well in that track. This next one is Human, and it just points to the fact that none of us are perfect and we make mistakes, but let's forgive, let's work it out and move on. Again, I think me being kind of a sensitive person, even though I've kind of worked on that aspect of my personality, I think there's a little bit of family history that goes along with being a sensitive person, and so a lot of these songs are just I might be like a little bit melodramatic, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. I think by comparison, I'm a little more joyful and happy-go-lucky type personality now. Definitely contrasts to back then, where it was just kind of dramatic. This track has, I think, another great chorus, just very melodic, kind of like Not by a Long Shot. I don't find myself playing this song quite as much live. I think there's one of the reasons is I wanted to capo up to the 5th fret, and I think that's just the way the song was written. It was like written in A minor, so I didn't always want to do that in a live situation, and I don't know if I was completely convinced or convicted about the guitar part that I had written for the song. I think it's good. I really do think it's pretty good as it is. But there's some practical aspects to performing it live that I don't always do. But I did recently do a performance where I kind of revised a lot of the Shipwrecked material and played all the songs off of the album, and I think that worked out pretty well. So again, it just depends on how you want to present it, and because I perform so much as a solo, duo, or a trio, you just find that it's kind of scaled down than what you would hear on this album, and I think that's maybe one of the biggest aspects of having to change the style or having to rework it for a live performance setting. Again, it's one of those songs that moves by pretty fast. It sounds a little bit like, it's got a little bit of funk and almost maybe a little bit of syncopation in there, so it makes me think a little bit of The Police for some reason, that song does. Then there's Cartwheels of Life. Now, there's two kind of slower songs on this album, and Cartwheels is one of them. The other is Pin the Tail. But Cartwheels in particular is probably just different from any other track on the album in the sense that it is very loungy, jazzy, vibey kind of song. It's slower. It's definitely one of the slower tunes on the album. But I'm definitely happy with the way this song turned out, and I think I'm singing better on this, maybe because of the particular range that I'm singing in is a little bit better than some of the other tracks on the CD. Not to be overly self-critical, like I said, some people are really liking what I'm doing. Even to this day, I still find people that show up and say, hey, I really enjoyed what you did on Shipwrecked, or that track was really great. So, sometimes I just feel like, I guess at times early on, I'm like not completely sold or convinced that it was such a great album, that I just thought people were buttering me up to try to sell me their services. There might be a little bit of that too. There might be, but I think, I think most people are actually pretty genuine when they say that, those compliments about this album, for sure. of course, it took a while to figure out. It was a really long process for me to figure out how to promote and distribute and set up a website. I mean, I knew I had to do it, but I wasn't excited about doing it. But I continue to do a lot of website and online and graphic work to this day, so I've become way more adept and adapted to it. It must have taken me a couple years to figure out how to promote and sell and distribute this album, and ultimately, it went through CD Baby, which is a really great affordable solution for distribution. And of course, I did see some, and still do see some sales as a result of that. So I think it's a great way to do it. But I think it was probably a year or two after the actual release, or maybe not quite that long, but probably 6 months or so before I actually distributed this album online for digital sales. So it worked out okay. So that's Pin the Tail, and we're coming up on Between the Lines. So we're really kind of the home stretch of this CD. And again, like I said, it turned out a little shorter than expected. Oh wait, we're at Pin the Tail. Right, there's still 3 more tracks to this whole thing. But yeah, we're still kind of at the home stretch of the album. 6 Sides and Pin the Tail were probably the first 2 songs that I wrote for this album. And so I think they were kind of the keys, or the most important, in a way, one of the most important tracks to the whole project. And they really kind of expressed some of the things that I was going through at the time. I don't think it was all entirely clear to people what this album was about and what the music was about. Maybe there's that kind of that element of, people actually couldn't relate to all the troubles that I was going through. Because like I said, I was super sensitive and maybe a little dramatic at the time. Again, music is just, if you love it, you're going to continue doing it. And it doesn't matter in what type of capacity. I've since been in different bands and worked on different projects that I've enjoyed. So, music doesn't have to end when a band breaks up, and neither does your life. This is one of those songs where if I had to do over, I would definitely do a few more takes on the vocals just to kind of get it a little more solid. I feel like it's a little off key, a little out of tune in places. And again, you can hear, the backing and the lead vocals kind of clashing a little bit. And that's not the backing vocalists. Christopher did a great job on the backing. He's a great singer, and he was kind of coaching me, teaching me how to do that whole thing. So, he's done a great job. He's a great singer, and I think I wanted to do a solo project, and I wanted to have something on hand that I could send out to movies and other opportunities that I was seeing in like Fast Forward Entertainment Weekly and stuff like that, so that I could, just grow the opportunities that I had and get my music in different places. So that was really one of the reasons I wanted to put this whole thing together. And the truth of the matter is, it really took a lot longer than I would have even expected. I was writing the songs probably in 2005. The album wasn't finished till, and in my hands till about June 2006. And then we waited till September to kind of do a CD release because, I don't know, summer just didn't seem like the right time. But so it really took quite a bit longer than I would have expected. Because, again, I was thinking 8-song EP, I'm going to throw this thing together in a couple months, and away we go. Just like, let's get this out there, and then I'm going to move on to my next music project. And gosh, that still hasn't happened. But and by that I mean my next solo album. Like I've done some other commercial releases now, played guitar on them, or mixed and mastered and produced them, stuff like that. So there's been some other cool musical projects that I've had a chance to work on. Here's Between the Lines. I think it's probably one of the more ambitious tracks on the album. And again, it was definitely inspired by a lot of Extreme, because again, I really enjoy Extreme a lot. And it goes through a lot of different parts. The intro is kind of the chorus of the song, but it's a quieter chorus than you hear the rest of the song, so it's almost a different part unto itself. The guitar tones I used on this album, a lot of them were from the Boss GT8, and it was a pretty frustrating experience for me because I just wasn't getting anything that I liked. I think maybe this song is one of the better ones in terms of guitar tone. It sounds like it's a little closer to what I wanted to achieve, but so many of the tracks just didn't quite happen the way I wanted. But again, in retrospect, when I listen to this CD, I go, it's not bad. It's not fantastic, and it doesn't make me quite as happy as the box I'm using nowadays, which is the Zoom G3. It's very affordable, and it sounds pretty amazing. And maybe part of that too is I've learned how I like to mix guitars in a particular track, and so that makes a big difference as well. Here's the solo part of the song. Originally, the guitar was playing along with the bass part, so there was like 3 guitar parts basically. So the bass part and the unison guitar part, and then the solo guitar. Unfortunately, what we found was that the unison guitar part really clashed with the solo. I guess it was kind of in the same range for some of the notes that I'm playing, so we decided to change that up. I think I did probably between 3 and 5 takes on this solo, and every time I just kind of had a sense or got an idea of what I wanted to do with it. Like I knew I wanted it to be fast, and I knew I wanted to get certain bends in there. So for something that I just kind of did off the cuff, I'm actually pretty proud of what occurred there. It actually goes on a lot longer than I almost intended it to, but then why not? Why not have one track on the album that has epic guitar solo? The other thing that I used on this album was the JC120 amp, the Roland JC120. That thing sounds pretty great for clean tones. So I think you heard it on Not By a Long Shot, and maybe a couple of other tracks possibly. That worked out pretty good. It was really the dirty or the distorted, overdriven tones that I was not quite pleased or happy with. But again, this is probably the example of one of the better ones as far as Between the Lines is concerned. I think people have explained this song better than I've been able to explain. There's a bit of social commentary on there, but the chorus has been explained or described as the inherent contradictions within human nature or the nature of man, and I'm going, wow, okay, that is what this song is about. They definitely captured it better than I could have. Lyrically speaking, I'm proud of most of what went on this album. It may not be, well, it's definitely not catering to anybody in particular. Lyrically speaking, it's really just songs about life and what I was going through and what my musical journey. So it is what it is. It isn't all amazing or stellar, but I think there's a lot of good lines. I do like the line from Between the Lines. Oh, there's something more than this. Between the lines. No, there's nothing more than this. Just another rhyme. I think that's a great line. So, Live for This Day. I felt like this album really needed some kind of positive finish, and even though this song lyrically in parts really isn't that positive, I think the overall feeling or theme of the song is more positive than a lot of what went through this. So it really does go on a journey. It starts with a little bit of disappointment, not being able to live up to the expectations, not feeling like I'm strong enough to deal with things, and then sort of examining myself, but beginning to examine others. Sort of a oasis in the midst of all this trouble and problems in life, which is Cartwheels of Life. Is really kind of summer. It's getting away, and and then all the way to Between the Lines, which is kind of a social commentary, then Live for This Day, which just concludes saying that, you know what, life's worth living and I want to keep on going. Christopher did a great job on that verse, by the way. I asked him to sing the second verse. I felt like it might be cool if I did the first verse, he did the second verse, then we kind of merged together. So that was really the concept behind that idea. So there were some cool ideas like that came together on this album too. I think there's more shots, more stops, more dynamics that maybe it could have been infused with, but it is what it is. These are most of them are like 3 minutes or less kind of songs, so they're all very accessible in a way. One more guitar solo for this album. I think I was going for a little more of a Yngwie Malmsteen or Harum Scarum type solo here. So the guitar tone, I'm not sure. It sounds a little too fuzzy and a little bit too muted to me, but hey, it is what it is. And again, the solo is not bad. I don't know if the Egyptian theme kind of carried throughout, but you kind of get a feel for that. So, and again, in the liner notes, there's a bunch of thank yous. Definitely people that either contributed or helped out with the stuff at the time. So, there's not enough time. We're at the end of the album, but I just want to say thank you to everyone that was involved and helped out on this project. And I'll talk to you again soon.